Hi, welcome back to Talent on Tap, and today we're going to talk about the HR regional role. So these are roles that are pan-region, and they have unique challenges and opportunities across the region, and today we're going to dig in a little bit more about those challenges with some amazing leaders at LinkedIn. First one is Newton Singapore. She runs APAC HR, and then we have Wendy Murphy, a little closer to us, and she runs EMEA HR. So welcome to the set. Brendan and I are excited to have you, and we want to talk about the challenges and opportunities you face in this role. But first, I just want to tee it up to both of you, and then we'll kind of go back and forth a little bit. For the audience that's listening today, jumping into that seat, it's a complex seat with multiple nationalities, complexities of business models, selling into countries, establishing, a whole bunch of different frameworks. What advice, what guidance would you give someone first in that role? I'll start with you, Wendy.
First thing I would say is don't get overwhelmed. We have a tendency to overcomplicate because of the complexities in the region, and the best way is to actually try and simplify. There are a lot more similarities than there are differences, and try and embrace the differences, but focus on what are the things that you can do consistently across the countries, and try and go as deep on those as you possibly can.
Very cool. And from a talent landscape, the market is always shifting and moving. From an EMEA perspective, with the current environment, what is the biggest talent opportunity or challenge that you're facing today?
Mobility is top of mind for pretty much every HR professional across the region. It's either supply and demand issues in terms of centralised head HQs that tend to be in the UK or in Ireland, and how do you get that talent to move to that country in volume? And particularly a lot of those organisations are hiring native speakers to service the other markets across EMEA. And then just mobility in general, and where we are moving people from, whether it's the Nordics all the way to Dubai and vice versa, and what are those migration patterns, and how do we source the talent based on where the needs are.
And so for APAC?
Yeah, I think the biggest topics are really around talent management, and in that it's about how we building the bench strength of leadership pipeline for growth. It's also about looking at skills and capability gaps that we have, and how do we start to be creative around opportunities to either look at talent that could be mobile across the different countries that could play the game, or how do we intentionally develop those capabilities.
I've got two recruiting related questions. First one is, what differentiates a good recruiter from an excellent recruiter in each of your regions? Are there specific things that you see as special and make people really great?
Yeah, for me, I would say two things. First and foremost, commerciality. Really understanding the business that they're servicing and being able to have a true partnership dialogue is the second thing with the business that they're supporting.
Great.
Yeah, I totally agree with Wendy. I think the commercial perspective or the business acumen is super critical. The other piece that I'll point out is relationship building, and how recruiters that kind of do an excellent job are really constantly mining the talent market out there and building the networks and alliances.
Is there a need for a recruiter to learn a second language? Is it part of how things get done recruiting-wise?
We tend to focus primarily on English as the first language. Most countries across the Europe, Middle East and Africa region tend to have English as second language. Where some of our recruiters do have a second, third and sometimes fourth language, it is really helpful. More so in terms of where we're trying to provide candidate feedback and helping them to be better in the next round of the interviewing, where they can nuance in some of the language is really helpful.
Yeah, and I would just add, sometimes it depends on the skills that we're looking for, right? So for there's certain kind of maybe further down the levels where potentially, some of these markets will demand a local language, and that's super helpful, right? So having recruiters that are based in the country that knows the language, but beyond that knows the nuances of the culture that exists, which then helps to infiltrate a different kind of opinions or bring perspectives in terms of what is a talent market to tap. So I think it's super useful to have, particularly if you combine the language and the culture piece together.
What are the opportunities for teams which may not be based in either of your regions to be mindful of in terms of how to engage as teammates or peers to make sure that communication works well, understanding is communicated effectively?
From an EMEA perspective, I would say just make sure that you include people as early as possible in the process. Number two is understand that culturally we communicate differently. We also hear sometimes differently. And so just give somebody the time and build up that trust. Definitely from a European perspective, we tend to be a little bit more reserved in sharing our opinions. So that will come over time.
There's been some articles recently on LinkedIn about the value of soft skills. And how does that emerge or show up in the region? Do you think in the region, the recruiters and leaders are realizing the value of soft skills, the agility, the emotional maturity, those things versus a technical skill, or are we still really focused supply and demand on specific skills?
I think it's evolving very much towards that emotional intelligence and being able to not only have the technical ability to do your job, but to show up well, to be able to communicate effectively, to build long-term relationships, to maximize whether that's revenue or whatever the focus is for that particular company. So definitely from an EMEA perspective, yeah.
Yeah, we're agitating the conversation. We're working with, in Singapore, for example, we've worked with the Economic Development Board and the National Trade Union Congress looking at Future Skills program. Part of that is actually developing new insights on what are the kind of skills that are required for the future. So the government actually is super interested in such an initiative, but also up-leveling leadership, influence and capability among Singaporeans. So that's an example in the Singapore market that we're dealing with. So there's definitely interest.
Very cool. Well, thank you both for your time. You have amazing roles. You have amazing impact on our company. And I know it's strategic in the sense that you set the tone, the culture, and you help us drive this amazing company. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.